we're going to talk all about rapid API development with Node and Sales. So it's going to be about 10 slides or so, and then just coding the rest of the hour. So you actually get to see all the different features of Sales, how to implement it. First and foremost, Sales is all about creating JavaScript-based services, hence why it sits on top of Node. The biggest thing it gives me, right out of the box, auto-generated REST APIs. It wires up all my routes for me. It lets me immediately start playing with all the REST verbs. It hooks up a file-based JSON database, so I can immediately start prototyping. I create a project, I tell it, create me a user API, and I'm ready to go. I don't have to write any code. But I can overwrite all of that stuff. I can add my own business logic into it. A lot of convention over configuration for that, and we'll see that when I start doing the coding, how easy it is to overwrite the built-in stuff to add your own business logic. But I get to do that immediate coding. I can also connect to tons of databases. They have 30 plus database adapters. So I only have to write the database code once. It's got the Waterline ORM built into it. So all that code gets translated behind the scenes to whatever the data store needs to store it. If it's Mongo, it's however Mongo gets stuff added into it. MySQL, Postgres, Microsoft SQL, Redis, Couchbase. And those are a few of the popular ones. There's another 20 or so-ish. Pretty much they're all free since Sales is open sourced. And to implement them, I literally go into the connection.js file, add a little JSON object with all the parameters like host name, username, password, database name, and I go into a model file, tell it, for all my models, use this data source. I can also mix and match my data sources. So I could have one model, like users say, maybe I put that in an actual MySQL database. Maybe I'm creating a to-do app. I want all of my to-do list in Mongo. I can do all of that within Sales, and it will combine it all back together for me when I make the calls. Since obviously we don't have technology today to associate foreign keys between different database types. But Sales will do that in the client for me. It's really flexible and configurable too. There's a whole config directory with everything you need to configure it. I want to turn on cores so I can make a real API, not just have it tied to a single URL. I want to change data sources. I want to change how sessions work. I want to add in additional middleware. All that stuff's right in the config directory. They also have security built in. Security is as easy as creating a JavaScript file that does a true-false check. And you can chain them all together. You can have as many in the chain as I want. The minute one of them is false, the chain is broken and it stops and returns whatever that error is back. And we'll see when you implement policies, it's like 3 lines of code. Some people think this one's a big one, built on top of Express. Personally, I've never cared. I've not in a year and a half ever had to drop back down and do straight Express work. You can if you want to. I've never had to do that. But some people that's a big deal because they have a huge amount of Express experience from their use of Node. I didn't come from that world, and I've never needed to drop down. Sales does it for me, but if you do need that, it's built on top. So, stuff I love about Sales. To me, it's ridiculously fast to do all of my coding. Create a project, run one command to get my APIs, run another command to start the server up, and then I can open up Postman or whatever your favorite REST tester is and start making REST calls. Add data, get data, update, delete. It gives me even the get by ID kind of stuff in there. They're all baked in. And it just works. Some of these frameworks go, do this to create a project, and then here's the list of stuff to go configure just to attempt to get it going. Sales just works. I've never cared enough to even dig into how it works. I've never had errors in a year and a half of doing enterprise apps where I had to dig in and wonder, what is it doing behind the covers or under the covers? Just works for me, which I love. I'm sure all of you in the room are paid to give output, and paid to deliver something to users. You're not paid to figure out how does the infrastructure work and why does the infrastructure work and troubleshoot the infrastructure. I'm not paid to do that either. I wanted just something that works, which it does. It also doesn't hide the magic. So that config directory I mentioned earlier, that's where a lot of the magic is. It's all in configuration files. I can read through them all. They're well commented of how to change them, what the ramifications will be, links to their actual documentation for what it's doing. So I can see how everything is configured. It's not just this black box that you see some frameworks where you have no clue. Why does it work this way? Oh, well, you just name the file and it just magically works. No, it doesn't hide that magic. Mentioned earlier it's open source. So being free is a really nice thing to have. And ultimately, I get a ton of functionality with a minimum amount of code. So setup-wise, obviously you got to have Node, since I've said it sits on top of Node and Express. And to get it, command line setup, npm install -g sales. There's two commands that we'll see on this next slide. One's this sales new. I say sales new, give it some project name. Sales technically comes with its own view engine. I'm using it strictly for APIs. I'm leaving the view engine out because I use Angular for my front ends. So I have them as two separate projects. So by passing the end here, the -- no - linker and -- no - front end, it takes out the view engine, takes out all of their gulp scripts, and leaves me with just the API. Generating an API, sales generate API, and you give it the name. So user, to-do, orders, customers. It will create you a model file, which is where you would ultimately describe your model. What fields do you have in it? The fields required, do they need to be unique? What data types are they? Do they default to something? And then it gives you a controller where you put all your business logic ultimately. Out of the box, both of those files are pretty much empty. They say module.exports with no code in them. So they're just there waiting for you. And then sales lift. That starts up the server. It reads through all of your models. It'll ask you initially, do you want to do a database migration or not? So as it sees new controllers, it sees new fields in your controller, it will try to insert them in as columns in your database. And in this case, out of the box, it's a JSON file database. So it sits on the file system in the .temp folder. It will ask you, do you want to do that migration or not? It doesn't just assume you're going to always want to do the migration. And then you can hit it at localhost 1337 and do all of your REST calls. You can also do debugging. So if I say node -- inspect app.js, it will launch up Chrome and start the Chrome debugger and give me a URL that I can specifically hit that will open up the Chrome developer tools. And I can do all the normal debugging that we would do for web apps. Set breakpoints, do inspections, step over, all that normal stuff. So take some questions before we get into coding, because the rest of this is going to be coding. So any questions at all? Are you ready to see some code?
When you said it comes with Vue, are you talking about the Vue framework?
No, it comes with a Vue engine called EJS. Yeah, not the Vue framework.
But I could use it.
You can use any framework that you technically want with sales, but because it uses the EJS framework, you would have to make sure it fit within that Vue engine. So I know they have like an Angular 1 plugin that basically takes all the Angular stuff and compiles it down to the straight HTML so it fits in. That's the reason I do the -- no linker, no front end, so I can just do straight API in sales, and then my UI is up to me whether I want a separate project. Normally it's a separate project for it. That's just the UI side of it. That just makes the HTTP calls into your API. Other questions? So I'll hit that one later. Here. So coding-wise, so that you don't have to sit here and painfully watch npm install run, I already ran that sales new project that was on the slide. It gives me this project here. So I get an API folder. This is where I'm going to get controllers, my models. Policies is all the security. responses is some built-in responses. Status code 200s, 404 not founds, 500 server errors. They give some default responses so that I don't have to actually go through and do the logic to go, what do I spit out for these? I can just easily call them. Then services, we're not going to cover today, but it's a place to put reusable bits of code that you want globally available across all of your different controllers and models. You'll see out of the box, there's nothing in the controller folder and there's nothing in the models folder here. So we're going to create one in a few moments. Then the config directory has a whole slew of files. So I can get environment files right at the top. I can get all kinds of configuration and look behind it. I can see connection strings. If we scroll over here, we can see a place to put all of my connection strings as I want to go to a real database. I've got routes and policies, all the configuration I need in here. And we will see a bunch of that in a little bit. So first things first, let's actually create an API. So sales generate API user. And create two. We're actually going to do a to-do one as well. If you happen to catch the little file explorer, I now have 4 files. To-do controller, user controller, and then a to-do model and a user model. All right, maybe. So if I take a look at the code here, there's nothing in here. It's module.exports and then a blank attribute section. Same thing for our controller. Just module.exports and nothing in there. So if I now go sales lift to start it up, I can start actually playing with it in Postman. We're going to add some data in, get some data. You'll see a big long nasty message here. Pretty much it just says, what do you want to do with the database migration? And gives you 3 options to pick from right here what you want to do. I picked alter so that it would add those new models into my database. I could do safe, which says I want to manually do that. That typically is a lot of times what you do for production. That way you're controlling how's your database getting updated and what happens to the data. Because when it does alter, if you drop a field out of your model, it's going to just drop the field out of your database. Sometimes that's not what you want. And I've had times where we've had a combined first name, last name field, and we go, you know what, we want to split that apart. So we're going to drop out the full name and we're going to split it. Well, if I just drop the full name and have it do the alter, now I've lost everybody's name and I got to do a database restore instead. So by doing none, you can write your own scripts to do that migration and control it. For today, we're going to pick alter because we're in the development environment and I want it to do updates. So now that I started up the URL or the sales lift, now I can do localhost 1337. I can say user since that's the name of my model. And as expected, we've got no data, but it returned us back an empty array. And here, let's actually add a little bit of data. So I'm going to add a JSON document here. So in Postman, go into the body, go raw for the option. We're going to say email. Give it a bogus email of foo here. And we'll give it a little password. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We can see record got created. Good. You'll see some issues right off the bat. It returned my password. One, it doesn't really know that it's a password field. There's no concept really of password field. So it returned it back in clear text. Technically, if I can put in the same user multiple times. I can change one of these and put a second email address in here. So if I go back and I run the get command, see, I can see all the users. I get all 3 of them back. But hopefully you're realizing that's kind of a security issue. You shouldn't see who the heck has joined your system. So let's go and actually update. Actually, we're just going to delete them because we're going to add some other stuff in here. So localhost 1337. And delete user. The first thing that's going to throw you, I bet you none of you expected me to actually get a result back. You should have just got a blank. They return the record that you were deleting back. It throws me every single time that I do a delete. In their next release, which is supposed to be their 1.0 release, they are actually fixing that so that update and delete by default will no longer return back the record. So now all of that is gone here.
Could you wildcard that so it just deleted all three?
Not out of the box, but yes, I could create a delete method that would delete all of them. It's a little scary to kind of do that. You would have to have a bunch of business logic around making sure, like, do I have the permission? Like, am I an admin? All that. But yes, you could just delete all of that stuff. So let's take a look at a few things here. So we saw I can insert the same email address multiple times. I can see multiple users. My password's not encrypted. So let's actually change out how do we store our data. So in order to store the data and overwrite the built-in method, if I create a method called create, here, this will, if I can actually get it in the right spot. So function create, I take in a request, I spit out a response. Just by creating the function like this, it automatically will tell Sales, use this instead of your built-in REST method for post. I don't have to do any kind of extra configurations. Again, it's the convention over configuration. So now I can take a look at stuff like, let's validate our email. So figured you didn't want me to type this all in by hand, so a little code snippet here. So now I can do something with validating emails. I'm using something called machine packs. So at node-machine.org, they're called machine packs. Basically, it's single-purpose libraries. So if I take a look at email address, we'll see it's got one method, validate email. So I'm not trying to be this whole helper library. It's just focused on that. We're also going to use the password one, which in this case has two methods. So we'll scroll. There we go. Check password. So I give it, what is the unencrypted? What is my current encrypted? It compares the two together and returns true or false if they match. And then an encrypt password. So these are great to use that you're not worried about a library that just goes, here's all the stuff I want to do, and you hope that they were an expert in all of them. Their goal is to be lightweight and be the expert in them. So that's what we're using here for email validation. I added it into my package JSON already. I just require it. I tell it, validate my request param email. So request.param email will look at the body of my message and pull out the email field for me. One of the really great things with machine packs, they can have multiple responses. So I can get an error, something internally happened. I can get an invalid, which means I didn't pass an email address, or everything worked. And now I'm actually ready to do my next piece, which I want to actually encrypt the password. I'm going to use that other machine pack that I showed, say request param password. Now it's going to do the encryption. You'll notice this one only has two options coming back. It's either error or it's success. Now if it's successful, let's go create an object and we're going to say email. That'll be our request.param. And we're going to do an encrypted password field. And this one's going to be result from the password encryption function. Scroll this up a little bit. And here's where the Waterline ORM comes in. I say user, which is my model, say .create, pass it my user object I just created, and I get back a callback. So it always is, first parameter is error, if there is one. The next one's the result of actually running whatever the Waterline function was, whether it's create, update, delete. You can do a quick check, see if any errors. I want to return back a server error and pass in the error for it. If everything passed, I can go ahead and say request.session user and actually give it the ID. So request session is a way for me to store stuff in the current logged in session. So when I log in, I want to store that so I can get back to it. What it'll pass back to the client is a cookie that has the unique ID for that session. So then I have to just pass that cookie back each time to the Sales API, and then it'll look up that session automatically for me and populate the session state. It's a great way to do logins and stuff, and we'll see it when we implement some stuff later on, then I'm going to use that over and over to make sure that the user's not passing in the user ID through all the calls. I'm actually getting it out of session. Because you shouldn't, if you're trying to store users or trying to look up users, I shouldn't be able to pass in what user I want to look up. I should only be able to get my stuff back. And that's what session allows us to look up. And I can say return.OK and give it the created user. Or created result here, actually, since that's what I called it. We'll take a quick gander and where the response. So the response server error and response OK came out of the responses folder. Whatever you name the files in here is what's going to be available for the response. So server error does a few things for us. It passes in request, response. Then I can do some inspection. Sales.log spits stuff out to the console. This piece is really nice that they have it in here. It says, if I've configured my environment as production, and I didn't tell it to keep all of my response errors, go ahead and strip out my error message so that I don't leak any potential information in my error back to the users. Because normally, you don't want to return back your internal errors back to the user. It could say password invalid or this field or that field, which gives hackers the opportunity to go, oh, you have a password field, and oh, it's called encrypted password. Like, you don't want to potentially throw those errors back, so it strips them out for you. And then returns back JSON and then our status of 500 for the server error. And then OK returns 200 and whatever data I pass back to it. So in this case, it's going to take my user model, it's going to send it to JSON, and then send it back to the user. But we still have one problem we've got to fix. Right now, it's going to return back the encrypted password as part of the serialization. We want to get rid of that. And that is as easy here as creating a toJSON function. I say create an object and say this.toObject, which is a built-in method. Now I can say delete object.encrypted password. And return back. So now every time I serialize this down to JSON, it's going to strip out the encrypted password field from the return value. And I don't have to worry about trying to strip that out every single place. A couple other things that I can do in here is I can describe what are my fields. Right now, it doesn't have a concept of required or unique. That I can say I want an email field. I want it to be required. I want it to be a type of string. And I want it to be unique. You'll notice that all of these are strings. Not totally sure why. I have noticed when I don't make them strings, they don't actually get wired up. The unique one is really intriguing to me, that it's unique on the server side, not unique on the client, which is really important as your system grows. Imagine if you had 1 million users in your system, and I said, I want my email address to be unique, and it had to pull all 1 million people back and scroll through it. That'd be terrible. Instead, unique goes, you know what, I'm going to do it on the database side. However the database constraints work, let's use that piece of it because that's their expertise. So it doesn't have to look at all the records. It looks at whatever the indexes are, however the system has set it up. And then we're going to look at encrypted password here as well. So say required, and it's a type of string. The one thing Sales does not have in it is live reloading. So you get to do the Control-C to stop it and restart Sales lift. Will ask me again, what do I want to do with my model? Let's migrate it. So now if everything is working right, if we go back and try to post the user, we can see no password field. So let's strip that piece of it out. I should also see an error. Should have seen an error if I had put multiple users in there. I did not expect that one. So we'll keep running with that for right now, and then we'll get back to that. Yes?
2 questions. If you could switch back over the code real quick. So in the user controller, did you have to import the user model at the top?
Nope. It is strictly convention based. So because I called it UserController, or because I actually said sales generate API user, automatically it creates me a UserController and a user.js in the models folder. And the convention just says, I expect it to be that way. So it's going to look at every model, whatever that name is, and then append controller on it and look in the controller folder for you. So there was no configuration I did at all to get that wired up. It does that automatically for you.
And so where do all, like there's no routes in the controller? Where do all those live?
So we will cover routes in a little bit. By default, it wires all the routes up for you. And so that's part of the power of doing the route API. You notice how quickly I started it up and started doing REST calls. I didn't have to configure the routes. It did all that behind the scenes. And by the convention over configuration, since I created a function here called create, it automatically overwrote the built-in post route for the user controller.
Question.
Yes?
In one of those things you said response.json. And is that, and then in your in the controller you had a JSON
Yep.
function. So I assume that's some type of either function that's getting, I mean, it's not necessarily calling that function directly, but it's calling, it gets called within that JSON.
Yeah, so response.json is a built-in sales method to basically take the model and serialize it down to a JSON response for me that goes back to the client. This toJSON function, and I know why these didn't work, and I'll cover that in a sec. So the toJSON function is just a built-in sales convention that says, if I see that function, I'm going to run through that every time someone calls .json on the response and serialize everything down. So here's why the attributes didn't work, because I did not stick them inside of the actual attributes. So now if I go restart sales, it's actually going to be very unhappy because it's got some duplicate data. So it'll probably error once and clear my data out. Thankfully it's development. There we go. So yes, so go fix my data. So let's see what we got here. So one of the great things, the message that basically popped up here said, hey, you have some duplicates. Do you want me to actually remove them? So I said yes. It keeps the very first one that I inserted and got rid of the rest of my development environment for me. So now if I go here and try to create second user, say I get an error, a little bit of a nasty error message. It says, hey, you had an invalid attribute. Validation rule failed. Should have been unique. Let's see, attribute invalid required, blah, blah, blah. Let's make sure we're passing in all the stuff. And let's make sure I typed all of these right as well. So let's try this one more time so you can see the right error. So I called it encrypted, not encrypted password. But in my checks, I told it I wanted something else. So it actually failed my required validator before it failed my uniqueness. So here we go. So this is more what I expected. Unique rule failed. Record of email already exists. Kind of a little bit of a nasty error message. Don't really want to parse that. So I showed the responses folder earlier. Literally can right click, say new file. We'll call it already in use. Get rid of the terminal. This is what an actual response looks like. Give it my response. I'm going to check, do I have an email attribute? I want to return a 409 status code, which is a conflict status code back, and then I can give it a message. So now I can go back to my user controller. I can do a little bit of a check here. So back in the error for the creation, say sales dot, do the unique check, because I never ever remember this syntax. Basically says, look at the invalid attributes, see did the email attribute field fail, make sure I at least have one error message that came back, and then check to see is the rule that failed unique. If so, return our already in use error back. So now this error message will actually turn into just a single string, and you could put anything you want into that already in use response. I could have set it up to return back a specific format for my application. Typically for your app, you want to figure out what is our standard error message that we want to return back. Do you want to have to be an object that has a status code, has a message field, whatever it is, it should be standard across everything. So now if I create multiple users, I can see email address is already taken. It's that easy to do those kind of responses and those kind of checks. Let's look at overwrite and a few other things here. I'm going to shrink this one down. So now that I created users, I need to be able to actually do logins. There's no point in creating users for a login system if you can't actually log in. So same way I created the last function, give it a name. By default, it's actually going to wire this up for me. So I'm going to say users/login, and that'll actually do the call to this function for me. I'm not overwriting anything in this case, I'm adding new functionality. So first thing we want to do is actually validate our email address. Or actually, sorry, validate the user and the password. So we'll say user.find1. Since I only need a single user, I'm going to expect an email address to come in, and I'm going to go against the database and look that record up. So we'll say request.param email. And I get our standard callback, the error and the result. Do a quick check for return res.server error. I can also do another check here to say if I don't have a result, return back a not found error. Now that I have that back, I can say request.session.user, since I'm logging in, I want to set that. Say result.id. I could store the whole user in memory, but because it's not a JSON object that I'm serializing, I'd have to go manually get rid of the encrypted password, else it would store that in memory, and if someone got a hold of your server and hacked your server, they could potentially snag that out of memory. So instead, I'm just storing the ID value. I don't need to store anything else. I can say return response OK, and we'll give it the result. Now I can log into the system with an email and password. Scroll this piece up a little. So now I need the inverse. Let's look at log out. So same kind of way. Request response. And I find even after a year and a half of doing this, I always have to say request response. If not, I can't count the number of times I flip the two around. And the standard, kind of just a standard naming convention is REQ and RES. And then I'll start playing with it and go, why am I getting errors that an object doesn't exist? And it's like, oh, the response object doesn't have a param. The request object does. So I always end up having to say it. So for logout, I'm just going to go ahead and clear the session, saying request session user is null, and return back a res.ok. Then last piece I'm going to set up in here is I want to see who's logged in. And I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm just going to return the ID back. I could return the whole user back, which would normally be what it is. But we're going to say res.ok. The one thing I have definitely found with the built-in responses, if you pass a number back to them, they will think it is the status code, and you will get some deprecated warnings from Express. And so instead, I'm going to pass it in an actual JSON object to say request.session.user to get around that one. So let's go take a look at what we just did. So restart our sales lift here. So let's hit our login. There we go. So now I was able to call the login function, set all of my session state for me. So if I just grab the get here, now if I look at user identity, spits out user 4 is currently logged in. I can also do a log out, or maybe not. Yep, we're going to go look at that right now. I sure do. we'll get back to that one. So we proved everything else worked. That one will work again. Restart it. So a couple things that your users aren't going to do. They're never going to go to login before they get data. Okay, that's kind of a dumb system to go. You must call the login function before you get there without at least giving an error, because no one's going to do it. So we're going to set that piece of it up with a policy here. So policies are just like responses. I give it a file name, so we're going to say is logged in. We're going to create a second one called is logged out. By creating the two files, immediately the policy is available. I have to do a little work. See, we're in the is logged out. So this is, we want to make sure we have no request session user available. If so, say return next, because you can chain policies together. So this is their way to say, this one passed, go to the next one that's configured. If it's the last one in the method, it just follows through to whatever it needs to run. If not, do the request forbidden and give it some message, or give it something besides you can perform this action. Say, please log out first. So as you can imagine, logged in is going to be the exact opposite here. I'm going to say, if request session user, go ahead and pass it. If not, say, please log in first. So policies are available, not implemented yet. I have to go down to my config folder, pull up policies.js. They got all kinds of nice comments. Stuff that tells you if I do a star true, it turns off basically every policy. Or I can do by controller. So we're going to throw in the user controller here. We're going to say for log in, we want anybody to be able to get to that. So we're going to say true, which says don't have a security policy whatsoever on here. For create, I want to make sure you're logged out first. So it is logged out. And then lastly, I'm going to say star for everything else and make sure is logged in. So this way the first two will be run, and then everything else just validates I actually did the login. We'll set one more up in here for our ToDo controller so we don't have to do it later. Just to say star is logged in. Because our to-dos, when we get there, every one of them is going to be associated to a user, so you're going to have to log in first. So I'll do a little sales lift. Now if I try to do a get on the user before I've logged in, I'm going to get the message that says, please log in first. So it immediately ran my policy. So if I go over to the login, log in for this one, we'll come back. Now I should actually get data. So easy as that for policies. Not a lot of code that I had to write to implement that piece. And you can have policies do as many checks as you want. I did a simple one just because I'd already put the user in session. But if you needed to check like the database for is the user an admin or check an Active Directory within your company, you can do all those checks within the policy. The only requirement is has to come back true or false. So that you can either say return next or return an error. Let's test our logout one here. So now that I'm logged out, so please log in first, actually log in, and let's go ahead and try to create a second user. So immediately I should get the policy, which I do, that says please log out first. So all of our policies are now set up for us. Last thing the user that's, one of the last things that's driving me nuts is this URL. It's not very REST-like. Normally you would see something like user/identity or user/current logged in, something besides user/user identity. That's more of the old SOAP stuff. So we're going to fix that one, and I'm also going to fix this message that keeps asking us to migrate. So you asked earlier about routes. Here's how you do routes. This is sales dashboard. It is the verb, what I want my route to be, and which controller I want to hit. I'm going to say I want to do a get, and say user/identity. It's in the user controller, and we're going to call the user identity function. That's all I have to do to set up the route. As long as I do all uppercase. Not totally sure that the uppercase matters, but why risk it? And I did promise we were going to fix that message that keeps popping up. So in the models.js, it does two things for us. We can set up the connection string here. By default, it does local disk DB. But then it has these two migration options. I'm going to turn on migrate alter. So now when I run sales lift, it'll just automatically do my database migration for any changes. Let's log in first since I've set that up. Because I've already wired up, or the sales wires up everything for you, the user identity one is still there, since we didn't turn it off. Now I can just say user/identity, and it runs everything for me like I would expect REST to do. I can configure as many of those routes as I want. I can also go in and turn off all of the built-in routes, so it doesn't do that for me and explicitly define my routes. So if you're not sure of what routes you want to have turned on, that is a great way to turn off everything and then explicitly turn on the stuff that you want users to actually be able to use. All of the apps I've created, I want the user to be able to use everything that's in there, so I leave them on. So the last piece that we haven't fixed in here yet is I can still see all of the users. Let's fix that one real quick. We're going to say find, which is we'll override the get to our standard request response. I can say user.find, and the ID is that whatever's in session. So request session user, we get our standard callback. Even though I'm only going to ever return one user back, I also don't want to break the standard REST contract that says get return back an array. So hence why I'm calling user.find, which returns an array of users, but I know it's going to only ever have one item in it. But you don't want to break that contract. Here you can also say a results.length is equal to 0, return back a res.notfound. Not return response OK, and return the results back. I can also do the same exact thing for get by ID. So I say find one. The mouse stays at the bottom of the screen where it belongs. So find one, to a function find one, request response. I can say user.findOne. Everything else is pretty much the same, except for the dot length. So we'll call it result because we're only getting one back. And this one we can just look for a true or false. So if it has a result, then we're good to go. If not, do a not found. So now when I actually log in and I look up the users, I should only ever see one. We're going to create a second user here just to make sure we have one. Call it foo1. Actually, do two because I think I created one earlier. Perfect, got the user created. I'm going to log right back out and log in though. All right, so now I got my users. Let's go and actually do a get statement here. So I only get my one user back. If I say user4, let's look at what a user ID, request session user, blah, blah. Should have pulled back one user. I do not know why it did not. Ah, thank you. I spoke not resolved and then typed it the opposite way. At least you're paying attention. That was secretly a test, yeah. We're going to run with that one. Let's log back in here. I will say the worst part about doing demos with logins is constantly logging in. So now I can only see the one user like we expected. If I do user 4, or if I type anything I want in here, I'm always going to get the user in there. So there's no way I can get additional users back out of it. So it fixes all those security holes. I can do the same thing with update and delete, where I make sure I only, instead of passing in the ID, that I use the request session one. So let's clear all of these out. I'm going to close all except for that one, since I keep needing to log in. Close other tabs. So let's play with the to-do piece. So the to-do works the same way that the user worked. I get all of my REST verbs out of the box. At localhost 1337/to-do. So got no items. Let's throw some in here. I'm going to throw a completed field. I'm going to throw an item field that has the text. And we'll associate it to a user. We'll say item, coding it Detroit.Code. Talk's still going, so we're not done yet. And we're going to associate it to user number 5. Actually, we'll do it 4, because I want to be able to see it. So got my user created. I haven't touched on this yet, but you notice for the user, I also had created at and updated at fields. Nowhere did I define those. Those automatically get added up until 1.0. 1.0 is going to make you have to explicitly say you want those fields. Great way to tell when you created something, when you updated it for time tracking. It also automatically adds the primary key for me. But you'll notice this isn't the greatest thing. Why should I have to pass completed in? Shouldn't it default to false? I'm adding stuff to a to-do list. You would expect that I haven't done it yet. And this piece is kind of funky. So check this out. I can actually say user 5 technically. It's not going to care, but there's no associations yet to the user either. And once I put the association in, I shouldn't be able to actually set it to somebody else. Because that would kind of suck if I can all of a sudden add to-do items onto your list and play around that way. So let's go and actually fix that up. So if I go in my model, just like I defined attributes on the user, define a few here. We'll say item, we want it to be required. We say type of string. We're going to say completed. Required is true. The type is Boolean. And here I'm going to say defaults to, I'm going to say false. So no longer will I have to actually define completed when I create a new item. I can also do my one-to-many relationships here, where one user has many to-do items, and one to-do item has many, or a to-do item has a single user. I'll say user, I could have called it anything I wanted, but we're going to call it user here. And we're going to say the model to go reference is user. So now, go into our user controller. We'll add a to-do items. We're going to say it's a collection of to-do, and we're going to associate it via the user property that we just, or user field that we just created. So that'll automatically do the one-to-one mappings and take a look at it for us. I'll also see a couple cool things it does out of the box. As soon as it starts up here. Let's log in. Actually, let's pull back up our to-do items. So notice right here, because I created a field called user before, it automatically populated the field. So I get all of my user stuff back in here. If I go the opposite way and I go look at the user one, it also populates it that direction. Almost. So when I overwrite it, and I do these find and find ones, it gets rid of the populate for me. So instead, I end up doing something like this. Close off my find, say .populate. And I want to populate the to-do items. Now I just say execute my callback function. I'm going to copy this piece. We're going to put it down on our find one function here as well. We'll restart, and now I'm back to having everything populated. I think it's kind of cool, personally, that they leave off the populated when you overwrite it. Because that means you want your own business logic you want to be able to decide, do I really need all the to-do items in here? Like, to-dos aren't bad, but imagine you're doing like Amazon and you're pulling back your user profile and your orders. When you look at the user profile, it doesn't have your orders list right there. You go to another screen. So do I really want it to pull back the hundreds of items in the last 10 years that I've purchased from Amazon? No. And so they leave that up to you to figure out, do you really want to put the populate back in or not? So after we go back and log in, oh, thank you. At least sales was nice and aired out for me. So back to one. That is a great question. So are we going to, or are they, because I don't actually work for sales, are they going to put in live reloading? There technically is an NPM module for it. I don't use it because they have a big warning at the very top that says, it doesn't work with all these modules. It's like, here we go. I'm like, okay, there's like 20 modules on this thing. How do I know if I'm really using those somewhere behind the scenes or not? I said, forget it. It's easier to stop sales lift than to go, oh, it stopped working because these modules are conflicting. So hopefully at some point they would have it in it, but unfortunately right now they don't. So back to our quick example here. So now that I did the populate, you can see that the to-do items comes back just like you would expect if I hadn't overwritten the functions here. The other piece is that I'm still doing when I create a new item. So let's actually go and get rid of completed here. So I still have to pass in the user since I didn't overwrite that. But we can at least see my completed defaulted to false. So let's go look at the ToDo controller. Let's actually overwrite our create method here. So now I can say to-do item say item request param item. I can say user, and I can now pull it out of my session. And just like I did the user.create, I can do to-do.create. Give it my to-do item, I get back my function, get back my results. I can do my standard error trapping. I will tell you, writing the standard error trapping gets old after a while, but it is definitely necessary. So we'll return back res.ok results. So now I don't have to pass in the user, and I also fixed the problem we had where I could associate to-do items to people that aren't myself. So this is always going to be whoever's logged in. I can do similar stuff with update. So update requires that you pass in an ID and you pass in the body of what you want to update. So here I can say to do, we'll say update here. Because it's an object, I can say, let's go look up that the user is equal to request session user, and the ID is equal to what I'm passing in the body. And then I'm going to pass in my request.param body, and I get my response back out. Or actually my error and my results. Here, we'll just copy this one. So Waterline has the whole ability to do multiple fields. So this one's going to look at what the user field has in it, as well as the ID, and make sure both of them match. Basically ANDs them together, so that I can only update items that I actually own. I can do the same thing with the to-do item as well. We'll leave that one for, actually, we'll put it in here. Why not? It's easy enough to go and update real quick. So we'll say delete. Doesn't pass in a request body. And check for errors. There we go. Little stoppage here, and restart we go. So now that that's started, got to log ourselves in first. So I'll look at 2 items, see which one we have. So it looks like ID number 1. So we'll change this to a put, change this to a 1. Off it goes, doing all my updates. Other thing I could do in my update I should have done is actually to pull out the record in the database, or at least overwrite the user so it goes back to the user, because technically I could update the user right now to something else. But that's as easy as doing var body or var to do item equals pulling out the to do from the body and then putting user equals the request session. So at this point we have a pretty completed API. Last 2 functions we can implement, just like we did the find and find one on the user, I do the same thing on the to-do items so that I can only get back the to-dos that I actually own. We'll quickly throw that one in there. Actually, I'm going to fix this one up so you can see what it would look like. So we'll say var to-do equals, actually, we're going to go this route. To-do.find1, pass this in. Do a quick error, call it found. So now I can, looking at the found result, I can say found.item equals request.prime item, and we'll pass that into, instead of passing the whole body in, we'll pass just the found item from the database. So that way none of the other fields get updated. I'm really only expecting that the item is updated, and we actually need to put in completed because you might pass that in. There we go. So now the user can never be updated. You see, not a lot of code. So I'm at what, 38 lines of code right now, and we'll go a little higher in a moment here. Comma. Change this to the, let's say, user. We're going to populate user here, since that's what that's called on the to-do side. Say to-do, that's in user. There we go. So 53 lines of code, and we've got a pretty darn completed API. So we'll do a quick login. We'll pull up our to-do items. I still get all the same functionality here that I had before. I can only see my items. So last piece, since we've got about 30 seconds left, is how to convert this over to pulling against a real database. So I've already got Postgres installed in a Docker container. I ran this npm install earlier to put in the sales Postgres stuff, configured it, and this was actually localhost. So now that I have this called Postgres, I could call it anything I wanted it. I could call it Docker Postgres, Rapid Postgres, whatever you want to call it. I go in the models.js, and we have this connection that I mentioned earlier, so I say connection, and whatever I name it is what I put in here. Restart sales. And if everything is working right, it will look at both of my models, look at what Postgres has, and make all the database changes for it. Now we'll see, this one will probably give me a 404 not found because there's no data in the database. Instead, let's do a post here. So now I'm able to create my user, I can create all my to-do items, everything I've been doing so far that was just file-based, which was up here in this .temp folder that got created. This is where we've been storing all the data all the way up to this point. making that configuration change no longer uses this file. It uses the Postgres Docker container with that 2 lines of coding change and off and going. And so now I can tie in my actual UIs into my API, goes against a real database. I'm ready to deploy it to production. We are out of time at this point, but as you've seen, the API, we're pretty much done with the API. There's not much left to do besides deploy it to production. Code and the slides are both of these 2 URLs.